Selwyn Collins of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. I know those of you who are not accustomed to me broadcasting on a Monday or any other day other than Tuesday or Wednesday. I'm sure you're probably surprised, but I believe in the saying, grew up in Guyana when we were kids. There's an old saying that says, strike when the iron is hot. A few weeks ago, I had Brother Ruel Johnson on because I think it was very important for him to come on and share his journey, share his story, and what he's about to do with the Janus initiative. But we were having some issues with the internet connection. And today I reached out to Brother Ruel and asked him for us to reschedule and found out he is in another country. I'm not saying where, but we are going to do a broadcast tonight. So, those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Conversations with Selwyn. And CWS is about having conversations with people about their journey and how they're using their gifts and talents to help others. So, I am going to skip much more of the preamble and just bring Brother Ruel on. Ruel, good evening,
Hi,
brother.
Sal.
How are you?
Hi, Sal. How things? I'm good. I'm good.
You know what? As I said to you earlier on, the Creator works in mysterious ways. But let's take advantage of this opportunity and chat, my brother. Uh, r- Let me start by saying Ruel Johnson is a writer and publisher living and working in Guyana. He is most recently winner of the Guyana Prize for Literature and Small Acts Literary Prizes. In May of 2014, he was awarded a Prince Claus Fund Grant for the advancement of cultural policy in Guyana. He has a 10-year-old son, Aiden. Ruel,
Hi, Sal.
you are an accomplished product of the prestigious President College, the dream school of the late President LFS Barnum. If he was
Yes.
alive and you could ask him two questions, what would you ask him?
Yeah, and I realized that we would have done it before. I think the first question I would ask him would relate it to his choices with regard to electoral politics. I think that his electoral politics and subsequent things that he had to do with regard to governance to ensure um, his survival as an executive president um, took away from the capacity he had as an intellectual leader, as a potential statesman, and as a founding regionalist.
Hmm.
Um, and if we're presuming now, um, I guess I was asking what his vision for Ghana long term was.
What is your favorite memory of high school, having gone to President College?
Favorite memory, I said before, I'm not sure I can repeat the favorite memory on the range. But I think President's College was an excellent place in terms of existing within, or I say that microcosm of Ghana. Um, in that, at the time, I think we had the bulk brightest um, of young people who were put into a domestic situation with each other. Not just an academic situation, but a domestic social situation. And for me, that is important, considering that in which we got to know more about each other. And I think considering that our problems in Ghana is that we live in these enclaves, um, despite doing routine things together. Um, we need to learn to know more about each other, and we can only do that by truly coexisting. And for me, President Salt sort of give us a precursor to that. Much of why my core philosophy on Guyana, what needs to be done to sort of rescue the place, because it needs rescuing, came about because I would have lived at President's College and I would have been exposed to cultures and people different from what I would have grown up knowing in my home neighborhood. I grew up in Georgetown, a place called Tugville Terrace. So yeah,
Ruel, you are known in cyberspace as one of the brilliant upcoming young leaders in Guyana. Having spoken to you and knowing about your modesty, you might not want to claim such a an accolade, but
I probably not.
I feel so. If I were part of a group of young people
Uh-huh.
within the diaspora, just visiting Guyana for a couple of days, and
Yes.
we met with you, and
Yeah.
we said, look, we have been so busy working on some initiatives, we haven't had chance much time to catch up on the news. Can you give
Yeah.
us a brief? What is the state of Guyana today? What? Well, let me fine tune it a little bit. Let me narrow it down a little bit.
Yeah.
What
Sure.
is the state of the youth in Guyana today? What is the pulse?
Was it trust? There are two ways I can put it. One, I think we have um, we have lived in a society youth has been discouraged from putting their voice in, putting their 2 cents into the into active decision making. If you look at the makeup of the political parties in parliament, for example, as a body of decision making, there's a great disparity. There's no sort of continuity, and the lack of continuity, um, it doesn't exist throughout the society in any real sense. I mean, and you, you can get by because in a society in which resources are scarce, not only are people, not only do people can be tribal or hegemonic in a tribal way, but they also tend to be hegemonic in a very personal ways, in which the longer in the tooth you are, the more you acquire for yourself and the harder it is to let go. What we've seen, however, in the past is young people are increasingly um, speaking out. There are more young people my age, which is early 30s. I'll be 34 in September. Uh, and challenging the status quo all around. Um,
Um,
yeah. So the state of young people is that I'm a great. I like to study history. I like to study movements and how people change and thing. And we are much the same way that feudal Japan was in the Middle Ages, or the term the Europe in the Middle Ages, or much the way that ancient Greek Athens was during the birth of democracy. We are in a state of confusion and um, Japanese called Sengoku. But one of my favorite TV shows is this Game of Thrones, and one of the characters was saying somebody saying chaos was this sort of gaping pit to swallow everybody. But the other character replies, "No, chaos is a ladder." And I think the society is falling apart at the seams. At the same time, you're seeing young people come out in order to not just pull it together, but why see in the future is that there's great opportunity for young people to help create the society that we should have created 50 years ago,
mm,
and that we have failed to.
when just lead me into my next question. When you hear the word Guyana, what comes to mind?
Always untapped, tragically untapped potential. I think I have no problem saying where I am. I'm in Suriname right now, and I'm here with two other young people who one of them who's very much involved in what's going on right now. And when we were coming across the border, and we were driving along the on route to Paramaribo, um, specific statement that she made was that you cross the border and you enter another world. It's not just another country, but another world. Because and you see the similarities of and this Suriname hasn't had in fact it's had its own fair share of problems, military coup, bloodshed.
Hmm.
But on the, but if it is to compare, say what not just what Paramaribo, for example, as a the locus of Suriname civilization. not only it's preserved, but what it has also grown at the same time. And that very much is the metaphor of what Guyana has failed, metaphor for what has failed, what Suriname has achieved overall, or what Guyana has failed to do in a great extent. So Guyana, we have the decay of old buildings, and we have ugly new shiny ones coming up. As a picture of this dichotomy with wealth and progress in the midst of decay. I'm not saying over here is perfect, but you have the grand casinos, but you also have the perfectly preserved colonial style buildings, which is very much part of your history. You have the acknowledgement of history with the statues and the etc. You have, and this is my favorite thing, of course. You see a nice little small community theaters. A friend of mine over here, Charlotte Ganga, is very much involved in using art in, in interventions in society, and you see a lot of it here. I mean, and it isn't overblown, it isn't ostentatious, but it is well done. And I think Guyana has the opportunity to salvage something as we go forge ahead.
Just sorry, I didn't get the last part. To salvage what?
It's something, whatever it is that is left that we can salvage. And
Mm-hmm.
that's by the way largely what, to a certain degree, what this project is about. It's not just about creative industries and heritage and stuff. It's about identifying what it is that works in Guyana and what can work, um, in both a tangible and intangible sense, and preserving that for a strong foundation and building upon that. The problem is that we have eroded so much that was ours, that is our collective heritage, um, that whatever it is that we are building is going to be hard to put together. But again, therein lies the challenge.
How would you say, you come from a much younger generation than I am, and h- how would you say your parents influence you?
Um, my my parents, I come from a low class background. I grew up in a range house thing. But my parents, they made sure that, at least in my case, well, at the beginning, whatever natural ability I had was encouraged. Um, so if I was bright in school, it was encouraged. When I went is that I got President's College, despite our worst fears, my mother decided to send me. She's very protectionist. Um, but my parents themselves, I mean, we never were subjected to any sort of prejudice. And it's largely thing because my family is sort of a hodgepodge of races. My father, I mean, he, like me, looks like we call Afro-Guyanese, but he is Portuguese and African and Amerindian mixed. My mother's all that, and an Indian as well, um, Borbis. Um, so we were never exposed to any sort of prejudice in my household, and that was something that sort of was solidified further when I went to PC. But yeah,
Who encouraged you to write?
who encouraged me to write? Myself largely. Nobody encourages you to write in Guyana, except it is that I see now that the most I can do for, and this is the most I can do for, as soon as I hear about some young writer, I'm instantly heartened. I want to find that person and encourage them because it is not seen, and it isn't at present seen either as a practical profession, nor in any ways any sort of noble one. I mean, I, and in fact, despite the fact that I'm doing it right now, and I make a living principally from writing. Um, it has never been really any sort of, it has been the face of discouragement. I mean, when people see that it isn't doing anything, you're not making millions from it, you're not seeing people progressing, the question usually is, why are you still writing? Uh, and this is despite, And I can imagine how it is for other emerging writers in Guyana, because this is despite my being fairly fortunate at the young age with the Ghana Prize, for example, when I was in my early 20s. But despite that, um, there's always the maybe you should try to do something else with your life. Uh,
So your duty, as you told me, is to explore the deep truth in the environment in which you live and present that to the Guyanese people and the world. How
yeah,
does
of
that
course.
affect the way you approach your research and reporting?
Um, well, first of all, I understand that divisions, particularly sort of rabid divisions we have, tend to skew the truth. Um, if not, if not from a reportorial perspective, but from a comprehension perspective, in the sense that one, not just that one people might witness the same event and report it differently because of political um, prejudices or partisanship, but two people will view the exact same event firsthand and have two different
Mm-hmm.
um, interpretations of that same event. Um, and that largely is based on this the sort of rabid prejudice we have. What a writer does is to explore the deeper truth of the event, not just present X and Y happened, but sort of contextualizes it and adds analysis to it and arrives at this deeper truth. And we live in a society of when people are afraid to confront the truth, not just about the situation, but about themselves. Um, the truth is often the truth can be a beautiful thing and set you free and all that, but before it gets to that stage, it is often a very ugly thing. And most people don't want to see that ugliness about themselves, or about their family. They don't want to admit that, my father might be providing for me, but he is a racist idiot that's involved in corruption. Um, and you could imagine, for example, I mean, in the present polity, a minister's child. Now you're part of a government in which there's corruption, there's racism, there is blatant irrationality, but you're a young person who is not culpable in any of that. But yet you're forced to affiliate with it. Because what you're seeing is your father was providing for you and giving you a good life and sending you to the States for vacations and schooling. Um, they sort of blind themselves to that what the situation that the parents are part of. And if you extrapolate that to almost every sector of our society, um, how people rationalize their fear of speaking out because they'll be victimized. So they blind themselves to the truth of this place. What writers supposed to do is say, forget all that. We need to uh, um, show what is there, show what exists without any sort of nation or any sort of spite. Either way, you can't be you need to dig, and it's a difficult job to get at that.
Mm-hmm. What you obviously are quite courageous with seeking the truth and writing the truth to the best of your ability, or just writing the truth. Truth is truth. What role does courage play for your type of writer in Guyana? And is it essential to address the issues about which you so often write?
Um, Beyond a certain point, as I said, I'm a father, and I love my son very much, and he is incredibly intelligent, and were I not interested in truth and all that, I would be forced to because I could not, um, I couldn't face him. If he asked, if he said that in the future, 10 years from now, and it'll be easily short, it'll be 5 years from now, because he's 11 and he's already asking me a set of questions that pose some difficulty in answering. But if he comes and says to me, Daddy, I've studied this, I've studied the situation, this is clearly wrong, you can write, you're a journalist, you're a writer, you did this in the past, what happened? How is it you failed to say something in this regard? Um, I can't conceive of a situation in which I'm silent and can't answer him because I don't think I can live it down, frankly speaking. There's no way I could live it, no way I could be comfortable with the image that would be forming in his head when he hears the rationalizations that I make for my silence. And that is the primary thing. I mean, but eventually, um, not even his rationalizations for his own supposed good. I didn't speak out because I wanted him to go to school or get the best education and stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So that is my primary thing. Not so much personal courage, but the fact that I I, I, I I fear his disapproval more than I fear any government, frankly speaking.
That's a very powerful statement, Ruel.
Yeah.
Very, very powerful.
Government comes and go. He's my son for life.
Wow. That the fear of disapproval is a much stronger driving force than the fear of retribution. That
Yeah.
that's commendable. You spend a lot of time in cyberspace. What do you believe are its short and long term effects on a place like Guyana?
Um, Short and long term effects. I think cyberspace has definitely democratized, particularly in the lead up to and after the 2011 elections, has democratized public discourse, particularly public political discourse in Guyana.
Hmm.
Um, Indeed, as it has in all other parts of the world. Um, to disseminate information is much faster. Um, you don't have to have a lot of money to do it. And what I found is while the internet is a place for a great deal of propagandizing and false truths and myths, etc., it balances itself out. In that if it is that you are speaking a reality to people that is not doesn't click with their own reality, um, then they reject it. It will be checked. It will be fact checked. I'll give you a good example. During the 20 elections campaign, the PPP had decided that it's going to take its usual ethnic scaremongering tactic of the Barnum years. And so what it did is that everybody, I mean, you could start from the various fake profiles, etc. that they did. And the usual thing was, when it was in the 80s, Barnum banned this and Barnum banned that, etc. Right? And one, Clement Rohi's daughter, Rima Rohi, who's employed by the government with this other propaganda stuff, um, went on Facebook and said she remembers asking her mother something with regard to um, making roti or something, and her mother replying that no, the thing was banned, etc. And a classmate of hers went on her profile and said, well, you grow teeth from early. And she asked why. The man said you were born in 1980 something, 1986 or something, or something equivalent. And how it had already reversed whatever ban. So, first of all, at that age, you couldn't speak when the bans were in place. Because logically, you couldn't have, unless you were some really precocious child, you couldn't have spoken about the shortages then. And she's like, oh, you're really smart, you catch me. But that's the thing, if it is what the internet does, and if it is that has been published, for example, in the Guyana Chronicle, or or elsewhere, or say the Starbucks News, or even the Starbucks News that the columns really like to send this stuff. Okay, true news, really. And that had gone unchecked. It would have helped to create this propaganda, right? That doesn't have the internet. You can be fact checked within seconds. That's why we, I think the government of Guyana, first of all, let me say this without regret. I have a very real sense of what we call real politics. I believe that politics, negotiations, etc. But I believe there's sort of moral foundation you can go beyond, and I think a moral level. But I think the government Guyana has sunk decidedly below that level. It's incapable of rising above it, and you see it increasingly in the various pronouncements, etc. The refusal to hold local government elections, for example, because the political climate is unfavorable to it, is a key example. Um, so my thing is what the internet does, and in the face of that sort of thing, and you've seen it somewhat in stuff like during the Arab Spring in particular, is because it takes the power of communication, of a voice, outside of specialist hegemonic areas of control and puts it in anybody who could afford access to the internet, whether directly or indirectly. It gives them a voice. So I think the long-term benefits of the internet as a platform for public discourse and political discourse is I can't see the shortcomings.
I agree. What is the Janus Cultural Policy Initiative?
All right, that's a big how stuff has evolved with me personally. I When I started writing a couple of years ago, I found that there were no opportunities for young writers to develop themselves. I started Genus Young Writers Guild because I was always fascinated with the whole concept of Roman Janus, the god of doorways and new beginnings. And so I started Genus Young Writers Guild. Eventually, when I wanted to, I found that there was no, when I wanted to get a prize, I wanted a manuscript by the way, so there's no publishing house. I published my own work. In 2008, when I started to write, I needed to publish the first version of fictions in time for Carifesta. There was no, there still wasn't any publishing house. So I said, well, let me just take Janus, which I used for Janus Editorial Services, which is the primary work I did, and started Janus Books. I eventually got into conversation with no ex-girlfriend of mine, who's an artist, a brilliant artist, and my why I used to campaign for with regard to literary environment got expanded to the need for a larger cultural arts environment. What I found, however, is that there was no arts and by great extension cultural policy in Ghana. Nothing to help shape the environment in a conscious, comprehensive way. And so I started lobbying for that, particularly during the elections and as advisor to the Alliance for Change on cultural policy, which is my thing. There was no movement in that regard on the part of government. So I kept lobbying for it and I started doing doing a draft plan on what I wanted with a national cultural policy. In fact, I tried to engage the minister at one point to work towards it, and frankly said I had nothing to say. I have nothing to say to you.
You said what?
I have nothing to say to you.
This
This is
coming from the
Minister
minister?
of Culture, Frank Anthony, yes. I have nothing to say to you. So when yeah, this the whole. So I tried a couple other things. I attended different. I've crashed. Like earlier this year, I crashed a cultural industries workshop. But I last year I was when I went to Carifesta, and again, notably on my own, I signed up for something called a book business workshops. I did a presentation, and there was a Dutch guy there, Matthias Ponte, who saw the presentation. He asked me if I was willing to wake up curate uh, a literary festival in Amsterdam. Um, so he invited me up in February. So after winning the Ghana Prize, however, what I decided to do was go early to spend some time in. I was doing some work for German university. Um, my girlfriend has finished, well, just finished her PhD thesis at University of Heidelberg. So they asked me to, since I was going to Amsterdam, if it is that I could just take a hop across and do some presentations there. So I did it. I did that. And when I was in Amsterdam in February, so I just stayed there 2 months. When I was in Amsterdam in February, I went to something called an organization called the Prince Claus Fund, and they asked me what sort of work I did in Guyana and what I wanted to do. And he said, well, basically we had no cultural policy, and I'm interested in looking at this sort of thing. And he said, well, we have a fund which we give grants, so maybe you should apply. So I went back home and I applied, and to do a project called the GNS Cultural Policy Initiative, which is basically everything that I've been campaigning for the past so many years, particularly over the past 3 years. And I consolidated that into a blueprint for a comprehensive national cultural policy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the crux of it.
Okay.
Uh,
I want to ask you a technical favor. I think
sure. Yeah.
when you're like very close and up over the computer, I think you come across a little muffled. I want to try
Okay.
you right,
How about
like that.
is this
Let's
better?
let's let's try that and see what happens. And if you
Yes.
keep like I keep facing the camera, so because it's
Okay.
Skype, Skype can be a little sensitive sometimes. All right.
Of course.
So by launching the is it Janus or Janus? How you pronounce it, Ruel?
Janus, usually.
Janus. Okay.
Janus. But yeah.
By launching the Janus ideas, are you seeking national cultural transformation? And if so, what kinds of shift in attitudes, perceptions, and policies must occur to effect this cultural transformation?
Excellent question. There are two ways about it. I've said I sound like some stuck record saying this, but I think I'm a firm believer that our problems are the core cultural problems. We don't know enough about each other in any meaningful way. These two warring ethnic factions and the other warring sub-factions as well. Um, in order to have enough trust in each other to craft a collective way forward. And that has been ever since um, in the pre-colonial era.
Hmm.
Um, sorry, is that your end? I heard a weird sound.
Sorry.
I heard like a ringing. Anyway, in the pre-colonial era. Oh, sorry.
Good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if it, if the problems are at the core cultural, I think the solutions have to be cultural. And for that to happen, it must take place. That solution must take place within a proper policy environment.
Hmm.
Um, one in which, first of all, we recognize what our collective heritage is, even as we focus and give recognition to the various strands of that collective heritage. That has to be done in a comprehensive manner. We need to ensure that our arts, that is the most refined expression of our culture, are given the space to develop just for the sake of development is one, but also in the ways in which they can, through their further refinement in the creative industries, contribute to the economy. Um, and that is how I see the cultural policy playing a place. Now, the cultural policy isn't, for me, it isn't the catalyst that we need, but it is the formula for the catalyst.
And
Because all,
how do you see yourself and I mean, if you're at liberty to speak on strategy, but how do you see yourself implementing such a policy?
we are, how we've started already, I think the key component of any policy implementation strategy, I think we've started already, is that we've involved stakeholders. By stakeholders, I mean the artists themselves, the
Hmm.
cultural practitioners,
Yeah.
the planning. Um, for example, last Friday, I have a conference coming up at the Umaniano on the role of culture and development. Now, not only have we spoken to various stakeholders directly, but on Friday we held an open seminar to help us plan what is going to go into. We gave about 5 presentations, and on the overall theme of culture development and sub themes like culture and education, culture and human rights, etc. And we are going to go through from the outcome of that and from the suggestions we got from the people who attended. We're also going to email a report in summary to other stakeholders. So by the time the excuse me, the larger conference takes place, there's going to be there's going to be input from as many stakeholders as possible. I've invited the Minister of Culture, as I did when we launched, um, to give his take on culture and development, the role of culture and development, and his blueprint for the future. He didn't turn up at the launch. Hopefully, he'll turn up now. But my policy for implementation is simple. The more people themselves have inputs into the process which create the policy, the more willing and the more prepared they are to implement that policy going forward.
Are you hoping for a that this might evolve into a sort of cultural movement?
Um, I hope that it evolves into several viable cultural movements, but it, I hope it evolves into an environment in which arts can develop as a business, um, and I hope that it provides the framework in which people can learn to create public policy and implement it. Other than that, I mean, I have in the long term, I have specific things I'd like to see personally with the outcome of this. That said, um, the reason that the process is so consultative is that I realize that I am one person. Not all my views may be valid, or even if they're valid to me, may not be valid to somebody else and their perspective. Um, so yeah, I
Let's
think that's some thought.
let's try this, Ruel.
Mhm.
And because I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing, and let's try from the top down. Let's try from the success of this Janus initiative.
Yeah.
Let's take it from, let's say it has evolved into a national and regional movement. And if we were to look at it from the top down, from the perspective of success, take us back. What you think would have been some critical transformations that would have taken place to make this a success?
Yeah. Um, First of all, the there are four major outcomes of this thing. One is the overall national cultural um, overall national cultural policy that looks at various things, but from two major components: the creative development, creative industries, and and Wales, and a cultural policy that focuses helps us preserve our heritage, etc. Um, which means that there's a proper, for example, proper museum protocol in place in keeping with established international standards in which we can preserve or if you've ever been to the National Museum, it's a disgrace. And I know there are willing staff there who ready to work once the resources are provided to them. But of course, they're starved of resources. Um, Again, I mean, Suriname here, and for example, the preservation of history here is profound. Um, Another outcome would be investment in an investment environment that seeks to greenhouse cultural industries, cultural and creative industries, particularly the film industry. I think there's tremendous potential for Guyana as a location for film.
Mm-hmm.
And in that tremendous potential, there's also tremendous potential for Guyana to be producers of film and for the film industry to be a serious contributor, a sustainable contributor to our national economy. And coming out of that, of course, improved economic space for Guyanese, a diversified economic space for Guyanese. There's one part of a research that we're currently doing. I think it's Morocco. Morocco derives, I think, about 16% of its GDP from craft items alone. And that is the tune of about $58 million per year, US.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we need to put those machines in place. Of course, the direct thing is respect for intellectual property, particularly from a legislative perspective. Our copyright laws are hopeless, at least 1956. It's a pre-independence era. You have somebody who's committed to giving us some basic copyright legislation, which we will table to Parliament and have them adopt. But we are also seeking parliamentary input beforehand with all the political parties to come to a consensus from our basic draft. So we're working on that as well.
Is it possible? I know everything in Guyana seemed to be somehow connected to politics or intertwined with politics. But is it possible to keep this apart from the body politic?
There are two answers to that. Yes, this. I mean, it is possible, and I intend to keep it apart from the partisan politics. But the establishment, the largest establishment of this sort of thing, it's a deliberately political act. The political, it seeks to ultimately transform, and I have no, make no bones about this. It, one of the primary purposes of this is to transform our political environment to be better, in that it helps to remove the ethno-politicization element from it. My concern is to remove that. So in a sense, there's no escaping the political component of it. But I don't have I don't have a partisan political agenda on it, rather cultural policy. It's just to create the environment in which people can make decisions in which, for their own lives, in which the fear, this ethno-political fear, is not the primary and only factor. Now, outside of that, this is none of us who are involved in the management of the project, and even if we were, but none of us who are involved in the management of the project is a member of any political party. I mean, I have personally advised the AFC. I have great friends in the AFC, and I've advised the AFC on cultural policy, and they were excellent enough to take that advice on board. But I've also criticized the AFC for the failure to hold the minister accountable. In fact, I had to talk about Moses Nagmutu on it not recently, and I have no. My focus is on the policy. Um, so this is a process going to be driven not by politicians, not by economists, although we have the input of people who are extremely good at the financial and economic side of things, but by creative people.
Well, um, this is a two-part question, Ruel. First
Sure.
of all, who and you may have said this in explaining the Janus initiative or idea, but
Yeah.
who do you hope to benefit from this initiative? That's one part of the question. And
Mhm.
secondly, and a more critical, not critical, but a more serious question in the sense that what is it about this cultural policy, this initiative, that not only inspires you, but en- encourages you to take a stance where you are not compromising on your principles where this policy is concerned, and you are able to separate this from the politics of the day. What
All right. What was the first part of the question
the
again?
first part of the question? Who do you hope to benefit from this
Oh yeah,
initiative?
sorry. Apologies. I mean, Guyana. I mean, like, it. I know a lot of talk has been going on about patriotism, etc. In this place is almost laughable. Um, but Guyana, I think I see tremendous potential in Guyana. And this doesn't come from blind patriotism, etc. I think, and this part, the colonies of the Caribbean, I think we represent in an increasingly globalized world a model for how people can live and work and function together in
Mm,
new ways. Um, we were the original experimenting globalization. However tragic that story was or has been, I think we just get our asses together. We can lead. We can provide moral, intellectual, and operational leadership for uh, a world that is heterogeneous as possible, which different peoples from different cultures mix. I think Guyana has the opportunity, um, frankly, to lead in that. I think our people are our most precious, tremendous resource. Our most powerful resource comes from our people and the particular history. I mean, we have the addition that we stuff that we feel to exploit in sustainable ways, the landscape, the gold, the mineral wealth, etc. But our people are our most tremendous asset. And hopefully, this policy in the long term, if it helps to shift our way of thinking
mm.
um, and help us to develop a culture of self-identity and self-purpose within not just a national context, but a regional and global one. Um, I think those are going to be primary beneficiaries, so everybody. And which kind of leads to the second part that will inspires me. I mean, this Guyana inspires me. Um, if it is that you raise the noise and you raise the bullshit and you spend a quiet night on say Camp Street or um, or you look over the city, you have a nice, small but comfortable apartment that's a bit higher, and you contemplate that you contemplate everything that has happened there. I mean, from throughout history leading up to that moment, right? You have a sense of how beautiful we are and how um, even better we can be despite our problems.
Sorry about that,
Uh-huh.
Ruel.
That's all right, but that's it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Again, my son is a good example of. I mean, I look at Aiden, and you consider that this crazy history. Nothing stable, nothing thing. There's so much that these entire worlds try to come together.
Mm-hmm.
And without that process, these various people meeting. I mean, Indian, Amerindian, Black, African, Port, the European, without them coming together, Chinese, he one would not have been there, nor would have the environment in which he lives, and which helps to form him. So
What when
yeah,
when you think about when you think about the Janus initiative, the cultural Janus cultural policy initiative,
yeah.
why are you so optimistic that it will succeed? Is it because of your interactions with the various ethnic groups, races in Guyana, also and or the participation that you're seeing in this Janus initiative?
First of all, I can tell you that I'm a very big-headed person. I mean, smaller projects I let go, but I have a very strong sense of where I want to go with this, and um, you got to see the potential. I mean, I see where it can go, and so that in itself is a source of forging ahead. Even though I mean, I get moments, I've got moments of doubt, time and again. That said, I came into this prepared to battle, um, prepared to battle. Uh,
What kind of fight did you anticipate? What kind of pushback
um,
and from where?
from the people themselves who, from getting people just to say, okay, this thing is relevant, this thing is viable. Like I you know, Sarah Barrett. I think you've interviewed her before.
Of course, yes.
Yeah, yeah, she's my project manager, and I chose her specifically, among other things. I mean, she's young, she's right, but particularly the fact that she's also fearless, and she's a woman, and the woman manage things better than men ever could. I can say that from vast experience. But um,
What kind of feedback have you been getting?
yeah, but this is my bit of what I was getting to. But I came in to prepare to fight, but I put all the call for volunteers, and then a couple of people came on, and some more people came on. And then I found myself like cooking for a set of people at home at my place there. Even as I'm getting charts and graphs saying this is the case, this is working. I was out to a meeting at President's College on before I came across here Saturday,
Hmm.
and there were a few people at my apartment with Sarah managing them to look at cultural policy expenditure, and I'm working on a framework for cultural policy expenditure. Maybe one of the components of the project. And I called back Sarah around. She said, okay, they go, we got a basic framework, and we're leaving, and they're leaving around 5 o'clock. So I said, all right, well, I can't make it. So let me stay on and do some more work at Oasis, Oasis Cafe, where I do some fair amount of work from. And I call back 8 o'clock and said I'm coming across, but I expect her to send something in the draft to me. So I said, come, I haven't seen the draft yet. She said, well, no, well, we decided to stay on and flesh out the framework even more. And when I went home, why it just was a very basic idea in my head was a full-fledged program for to engagement in cultural policy expenditure analysis.
Who's the
Beyond anything, eh?
who did that?
Well, there are two volunteers, extremely brilliant. Shamizu David and Alana Walters.
Hmm.
Friend of mine, Norwell Hines, who we're engaging as well, and Sarah Barrett, who did us this extremely complex but at the same time functional model, and I was like, okay, all I had to do was sign off on it. I couldn't add anything more to it. And I found that lesson repeated time and time again. I engaged very talented young writer as well, UG student, like Subrat Singh,
Hmm.
uh, who recently won the short fiction award for this Walter Rodney Foundation thing prize, writing prize. Sarah, by the way, won the poetry. And this is something by was judged among other people. The final judgment of this was made by George Lamming. So this is quality writing.
Yes.
But after one conversation, Subhadros came up an excellent idea for what we call creative spaces that you could link together in a network of creative spaces around Guyana. And that is going to go into the policy. So every time that we have any sort of engagement with people,
So do you see some of your meetings sometime like a war room per se?
oh yes, that was a war room. Maybe we on the floor. There's charts. In fact, as soon as you enter my door right now, my apartment, there's a chart on the wall. Um, there's a chart on the wall. On the floor, there are cardboards, there are real markers, etc. Printouts of schedules, tables that we table everything. Table. So yeah, it's very much a worry. Um, there's a great deal of strategy goes into this thing, even more than I anticipated. And what most people don't know about me is that I am extremely psychotic and meticulous about planning.
I like that.
I'm extremely meticulous about planning. I mean, I I've done my books, for example, and I do sales projections. I do every single aspect of say fictions, for example, the publication was done by me.
Is that so?
Layout, yeah, layout and design, photography. It's my actually my shoe on the cover. My own photography, layout and design. I taught myself Adobe and design. I
I'm
published
I'm
myself
only
on
laughing
art.
because you remind me so much of myself that I teach myself whatever I need to know to do
Yes,
whatever is at hand. That to
I,
me is the how I call it. That to
of
me is
course.
like a samurai, so to
Sometimes
speak.
yeah, I teach people afterwards how to get it done.
Right.
But it's a learning process. Now, for example, the workshops coming up. You have a workshop on Wednesday, for example. Um, I've done writing workshops, journalism, teach writing, poetry, drama, etc. And I have to come up from scratch with the everything from scratch. And what I do is I cut off myself from any other source of information, and I take myself through a process on how do you get to this stage? How do you get to the end of a story? How do you get that story? And then repeat that process, and then capture those steps in a in a modular way, and then have that module be taught.
You know,
So
what do you say to people who doubt the authenticity of the Janus Cultural Policy Initiative?
um, on a one level, I mean, what I found, I tend to first I also the authenticity of what I mean. I don't see how it is that it could be inauthentic.
Right.
There is no policy. The people who have been responsible for policy have abdicated that responsibility. Is one. I could have stayed home and done a great deal of research and crafted a policy based on um, existing policies because the world is increasingly integrating culture its into developmental models. Um, Culture, where it was missing from the MDGs, is going to be a critical part of the post MDG agenda 2015 and onwards. Um, and I tend to think that, I mean, I'm hard pressed because I usually, again, because I try to say, okay, if it is that this thing is seen as inauthentic, how do I respond to that? But I can't find a way that it can be seen as inauthentic. I mean, The most I've gotten so far is that, you want to create bureaucracies, etc. But I simply point out that no, this is consultative process. Everybody's invited to the table. That is my one rule in this. I
Good.
have no exclusion for anybody. So you can't say it's inauthentic if
When
I'm
it
inviting
hasn't,
everybody to the
yeah.
table. I'm not picking and choosing. If it
Ruel,
is that you, uh,
Ruel, race and racism.
uh, yeah, of course.
How what kind of stumbling blocks? Here's the paradox I'm seeing in this. Here's a cultural policy
Yeah,
initiative that is designed to bring all these various strands together:
yes,
the ethnic strands, cultural strands, artistic strands, and so on.
yes,
Yet, in that effort, that same effort can
yeah.
be curtailed tremendously by the very strands that we're trying to bring together. How my brother do you navigate that? I should have called it
So that,
stream of
that,
paradox.
that is very basic. That's very basic. I mean, and I actually put this when I applied to policy. One of the word stayed me through, um, and very much sort of an echo in my head when I was crafting the policy is that again, from this movie Meet Joe Black, when Anthony Hopkins' character was starting to death embody the character of Brad Pitt, and played by Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
And Hopkins' character says basically, the more we know about each other, the greater the chance that we will survive. And I
Mm.
think the one thing, the thing that makes people know more about each other is conversation.
Yes.
And the best conversations come out from people who are the most articulate in representing positions. And those are very often artists, writers, etc. It doesn't have to be a sense that two people sitting down at a table talking. It can be a conversation wherein somebody from within a community has the capacity to best articulate their personal and their communal position on something. And if it is that somebody else from a community in which that person has been at war, that's the same thing. Why find? So you get those positions out there, not by half measures, not by fear or negative myth making. That is going to start a national conversation. So one of the things we're doing right now, not only are we bringing people to the center in terms of inviting them to workshops, we're actually taking the writing workshops to different areas, different communities. And we take those writing workshops, or things that we're going to give people in those communities the tools to have them, particularly young writers, tools to have them best articulate their personal positions to add to this overall national conversation. And that's how we're going to deal with, in the long term, in the larger sense, the issue of race and ethnicity. That said, what we did is we divided the program. It's an 8-month program um, with 7 months of consultations and conferences. The first month, July, looks at culture and development, which is this month. Second month, which is, and the idea we put the second month is that we're looking at culture and ethnicity, and we're going to have and that's going to be our first three-day conference. We're going to have 3 days of people coming together, and I don't, from extremists to moderate, etc., to speak in an open conversation about ethnic and our ethnic and racial heritage and what it means. They can express their fears, they can express their prejudices, but it must be in conversation with each other in an open way that has never happened in this place before. And that is going to be a hard task, but I intend to get it done. Particularly getting people who have had either extreme measures in an objective sense or people who've been accused of having extreme measures because positions. Because very often you find in both sides, all sides of the divide, you find the people who are most articulate and most passionate and most sincere about positions and who are often most right. Because, again, we spoke about this, people tend to blind themselves to the reality, to their own ugliness, or tend to be labeled as extremists, which may not necessarily be the case. Um, so I want everybody to the table, from extreme ends of the divide. And of course, we look in the religious with regards to there's the politics of religion as well as played into our ethnic politics as well. So, but I intend to bring them to the table. Everybody to the table, have them speak in a very public way, have that recorded, and have those opinions
Hmm.
encapsulated in a consensus-based public policy and how we as a country deal with ethnicity, both from a general policy perspective as well as a legal perspective. You have the ERC, for example, which is the legal entity. How do we operationalize the ERC to do actual work? On the Agile, it failed completely. And he clearly showed his partisan thing. We need an honest broker, for example, at the head of the ERC. Um, so, and we need conversation. We just don't need reporting on to the ERC on confrontational issues. We also need the ERC, for example, or whoever in general, to have a mandate to fight ethnic prejudice in Ghana by showing that there are people who coexist together. One of the things I had, and this is years back for another project I wanted to get done, is to show mixed marriages and mixed friendships as a definite camp. You know, so you have this sort of humans with New York sort of thing, or humans of wherever. I want to show human people in relationships to each other that that work against this myth of ethnic cleavage that we have. Not a myth, the reality of ethnic cleavage, but the myth that sustain it. Sustain it.
It's systemic.
Yeah, it's systemic. So it needs to be attacked systemically. So in
Hmm.
August, we're going to deal with that.
Looking back on your journey, Ruel, what would you do differently?
Um, what I do differently? That's a hard question.
You want us to leave this for another 5 years when you come back? Another time?
Yeah, yeah.
We could postpone that particular question.
I think it's still a difficult question. I think I would have been kinder to a couple of people. Um, I what is it? I have been prone to taking a very hard stance in certain issues, and I found very harsh ways of expressing myself. I think that's useful. I think particularly those in power need to know that they can be defied and they can be disrespected um, if it is that they do not earn respect of the people that they're supposed to be working for and they're doing things contrary. Um, but I think that in my personal life, um, all friends, I could have been kind of. I very often you find that if it is that you are at war, when you come home, um, when you come home from that war, you have to stop being a soldier.
Mm.
And yeah, and very you need to find the balance.
Hmm.
There's the Naichi quote. Was it? And I actually have the German. I'm showing up because I could actually pronounce the German. That's one of my favorite quotes. Growing up, I didn't do it. Didn't have a practical idea what it meant. But it goes on. Wer mit Ungarn kämpft, mag zwischen das er nicht dabei zum Ungarn wird. Und wenn du lange in einen Abgrund blickst, blickt der Abgrund auch in dich hinein.
I didn't.
And basically,
I didn't
and
hear
basically,
you. I didn't hear you clearly just now, Ruel.
hang
If you,
on,
if you,
it basically says this: he who fights with monsters should beware, lest he in so doing become a monster. And when you gaze too long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you.
You know,
And any,
the question was about what would you do differently, and you rightfully stated is an unfair question. I interpreted it as because you're still a very very young man. Now,
yeah,
is
yeah,
it fair to yourself to
uh-huh.
say to 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 reflect on what you could have done differently when there was so much time ahead of you to transform and do it differently? So
Oh
I
yeah,
think,
well,
huh?
yeah, yeah. But that said, I've been 10 years at what I've been doing, and there's enough time in 10 years to reflect. If you can't reflect, now actually no, it's long. It's about 14 years. So if you don't reflect in about 14, 15 years, if you don't find time for some reflection in that, in the mistakes you've made, then from a very basic perspective,
Uh
you shouldn't comment on politics, for example, because the average political term is 5 years.
huh.
So yeah,
Let me ask you a question. You know, when I think of Sarah Barrett and you, I am reminded of torches.
yeah,
Uh, because I think of two of the most brilliant beacons i- Guyana is so fortunate to have at this time. Why do the two of you bother? I know there are others. And I understand
yeah,
that. I get that. But why do the two of you spend so much time together working collectively on various initiatives and so on?
oh,
Why do you think you bother? Why do you take the controversial, critical, and often potentially dangerous route?
oh, first of all, let me say this. I think Sarah's a phenom. She's phenom. So it might be in order to say we actually work a lot together in the sense that when I with the Prince Claus Fund Grant, I mean, I brought her on as a project manager, yes, um, but it's hard to, and this is why, and again, this is why one of the reasons I would have brought her on um, is that it is hard to direct Sarah to do and or work collaborate with Sarah to do anything. She's very much her own independent spirit, and the most I can work with her in is an advisory capacity. I mean, this thing, yes, it's coming from me, but she in particular has one considering her age. She's in her mid 20s, younger than I am. Um, she has come from. She's taken a position. I mean, if you look at the ethnic politics, for example, she has taken a position that is even more dangerous. I don't have the capacity. I don't have the. I'm pretty sure I would have been who I am, wherever my ethnic heritage would have been. Um, the Indian instead of mixed to a certain degree, but still, you cannot discount the fact that you have somebody who could have easily said, chosen a part that says, my people. And Sarah is always unreservedly, unabashedly, self identify herself as Indian and Hindu Indian, um, with all the rich heritage that comes with, rich positive heritage, aspect of heritage that comes with. She's always been unafraid to say it doesn't matter that people who supposedly look like me are in power, and people who supposedly look out for my interest in power. Now, this doesn't mean because that I've come from this tradition that is aligned with this particular power, um, that I will take that path. And that I think that is far more dangerous and far more courageous than anything I could do right
Mm.
now, to the circumstance. To remove yourself um, from a situation and fight against that situation in which you can, just by virtue of being yourself or being this this outward identity, benefit. Um, I think that's courageous. That is, and you see the if you look at the people who would have changed history, a lot of them are like that. I mean, if you look at um, Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha,
Hmm.
who was born rich, But who thing? If you look at Ernesto Guevara, who was born into the Latin American middle class, and who was stay there.
And even Mao, who wasn't born poor.
Exactly. So very often you find people who have the courage to remove themselves from a position of advantage to one in direct opposition to the status quo that would otherwise benefit them. Those are the people who I think should be reserved for greater focus. And so it's been an honor to have agree to work on this particular project.
Hmm. What would you say are some cultural challenges Guyana faces?
In a larger sense, there are two sense. We have the two major at this point in time, outside of the ethnopoliticization, etc. I think it's given birth to two serious cultural problems that seeks to perpetuate the status quo. The first one is a culture of um, reticence by the general population. Um, People are afraid to say what they want to say, and and this is not just the man in the street who's afraid when the police car passes, no matter what. It doesn't matter, or when it's the the, the middle class person who wouldn't want to speak out turn because the minister might be offended, the contract might be cut off. Um, there's a culture of reticence that that's, that needs to be changed, needs to be overthrown. And coming out of that culture of reticence, and of course the growing culture of fear, or the causative culture of fear, is the culture of impunity from those in power. Um, and that in itself is going to go away when we overcome our culture of reticence and simply pointing out that this is wrong. And every time you see, particularly again, where power is concentrated most, which is in the existing government, every time you see some absurd act, what you're seeing is impunity. When Gil Teixeira says that the feedback, the backlash from the ignorant remarks made by Priyamani Chan, the American ambassador's thing, when you see that she's come up with the absurd position that it is racist and sexist to point out stupidity, um, that's the culture of impunity you're seeing there. It doesn't matter how stupid your excuse sounds, you will say it because you fear no censure, no sort of censure, and no retribution from it. Not politically, not socially, um, or at least not in society that matters to you. Um, not politically, not um, you don't you well that might be the last part might be delusional, but you don't fear the political ramifications of being a corrupt idiot, um, spouting nonsense, and that is what impunity is.
Hmm. How did it get there? I mean, I understand the well.
Fear, bribery, how it always gets there. I mean, who the PPP hasn't bullied? Um, they've bought, and everybody else is in the key positions.
Hmm.
And very often you might not see it directly, but you see it in the absence of certain voices and certain situations. And history has always been a case where even in when there has been mass action, that mass action has always come about because very few people have decided that one, to frame what needs to be done, and two, to convince enough people, a quantum of people, that we are going to do it. We're going to actively do it. And what started out with the ethnic divisions, etc., and the ethnic and the subsequent political divisions have been transformed into something much greater. You can see people like Ricky Singh, for example, who were logical and balanced, etc., during the Burnham and Hoyt era, and who pointed out things has gone silent. And even while he continues to live in Barbados and is perpetually praises the PPP. So that's sort of a mutation of objective analysis, and those we've had. We have people who I find people contort themselves to excuse their silence and rationalize it. I find people are willing to jump upon, and I found it particularly. I mean, in last year, I pointed out the fact that the Minister of Culture used state resources to get his book published on the Caribbean Press at 13 years old. I had people who drummed down my throat from quite absurdly attacking a 13-year-old girl. When in fact, I didn't accuse her of it, I accused her father of doing it. But people who are willing to do that, who are willing to say that you did something that you did not do, even when I was pointing out something that was right. Now he's gone silent, but the very same people who are willing to do that can't correct themselves. They can't come and say, you are right. Up to now, the man hasn't produced a single document saying he paid for his daughter's work, and even if he did, the fact that he uses state mechanism to get it published when no other young person is afforded that opportunity is at the very least unethical. But interestingly enough, not a single person ever came to me and said, and even when I said publicly that the PPP has attacked, in the wake of those criticisms, has attacked my income, nobody ever came to me and said, the same people who came to me and said, how could you attack a little girl? Which when I did, nobody ever, and how could you affect her? Because this thing is going to affect her or whatever. Nobody ever came to me and said, how are you doing? Is the fact that they've attacked your income affecting not only you, but your ability as a father to provide for your son. And that is the sort of society that we live in.
You're saying nobody has ever come to you and asked that question?
Nobody, not a single person. And I think I don't shy away from my son. My son is everywhere. Is my picture thing. I mean, Facebook, you always see, we spend quality time together, when it is that my schedule allows. It's about an hour and a half long together. But nobody, not a single person has ever come and said, okay, you're clumping, how are you affected? Or how is your son affected? But the concern for the minister's daughter, when I was speaking the truth, always there. And this is sort of society we live in, wherein people align themselves with power that is clearly in breach of its commitments, ethical, moral, and often legal commitments, and often against the person who is bold enough to say that, this power is in breach. They'll find every moral thing. And that's part of the culture that has to change. People need to be courageous enough and have enough integrity to say, regardless of whether, if it is that I was wrong, fine. I was wrong, and I have no problem saying I was wrong. Even if it's a conditional, even if my error was conditional upon further evidence, I have no problem saying that. But people line themselves with power. It's easier for people to do that. But when it comes to aligning themselves with truth, and this is very much the theme of our conversation, which is establishing an environment of truth. we have to move from a society where we align ourselves to truth, whether it is with the powerful or the powerless. And very often you find that the reality is that the poor and the power or the powerless don't have the ability to skew the truth. The truth is very plain, very simple. The truth is very often the inability to feed the children or afford transportation. Those truths don't change, though you don't think. It's not about whether my children are born in the States or they were registered in Canada and stuff like that, or I sold my house for 5 million versus 10 million. Whether it is that I'm receiving X or Y benefits or whatever, whether it is that I deserve uncapped benefits like the foreign president, or whether my benefits to be capped, it's always the powerful who are ready and willing to, in their own interest, to speak the truth. But the poor now, the powerless, the poor and the powerless, now have to be able to say, the only way we can have access to the truth is by taking, and this is a thing, speaking truth to power. That is what we need to do more in this society.
You know, Raul, if someone listens to this, and it's difficult not to come away with a sense of hopelessness and despair. Obviously, you have hope. You're still there, and you're a warrior. You're fighting the fight. But in an atmosphere, a social atmosphere such as this, where there is fear, and you said people tend to align themselves with power.
Yes.
In such an atmosphere, conscience either takes flight, or hibernates. But history has taught us that, regardless of how severe the circumstances are, whether they are
Yes.
mass genocides and evidence of such in mass graves, evidence of such and so on, somehow or the other, conscience is awakened,
Mhm.
and conscience takes up either arms or words, but conscience fights back,
Yeah.
and in some way restores a sense of decency and peace.
Yes.
From your perspective, my brother, what do you see will be, or what do you see as the awakening of conscience? Who do you believe will, or what forces you believe will awaken conscience if, as we have put it, conscience is hibernating at this moment in that particular society? What do you think will be the awakening of conscience, or who will awake conscience? How do you
Simple.
see conscience as the future?
Well, I believe this is why this is the thing that, again, the key component of this thing. I think artists and writers, because they focus specifically on refinement of expression, are going to lead the way. I mean, you've seen it. You've seen it in places. I mean, um, and my thing is the best model for this is the former Czechoslovakia,
Uh-huh.
which is under communist dictatorship for years, but the person who was um, most instrumental in shaping and defining what was wrong and providing a way forward and articulating the concerns of people was the playwright Václav Havel, who eventually became the president of Czechoslovakia. Um, but he was, and he had a great deal to say. I mean, if it is you see, we had to say about the moral mood of the vast majority of people under the dictatorship, we find that mood existing in Ghana today. Indeed, we find it encapsulated in um, when you read Martin Carter, or you read the speeches of Walter Rodney,
Mm-hmm.
right? And Walter Rodney was a political thinker, but Walter Rodney's great. Most people recognize Walter Rodney as the historian. They recognize Walter Rodney as the politician. But Walter Rodney's greatest asset was that he was a writer. He was. Most people don't realize that Rodney was, among other things, a writer. He didn't just poof and become a historian. He wrote. He wasn't a historian studying and then teaching. He wrote.
Mm-hmm.
And every speech he did was an exercise in rhetoric. And most people don't recognize that. It was an exercise in what was his particular skill, which is rhetoric. He wasn't, to be fair to Rodney, he wasn't the best political organizer. He wasn't the best logistical person. He wasn't the best spy master. He wasn't the best thing. But what endeared him to people and what made him as effective as he did was he had the high art of literary rhetoric, in the sense that he was able to encapsulate, examine, and get to the greater truth of the situation, and then express that in words.
So,
And people don't remember Rodney charging into That is Rodney's finest hour wasn't him charging on a white horse and thing. It wasn't him planning a great rally and stuff like that. People remember him using words, and his words are what remain to this day. Um, Even when the revolutionary um, is gone, in terms of the action, his words remain, his rhetoric remains. So again, the writers and artists, Martin Carter, a few people have captured the era as much as Martin Carter. But after Rodney and after Carter, you have writers being removed from the socio-political space,
Mm-hmm.
particularly during the past 20 years. And all the talk about democracy, etc. There are more books published in a single year under the Height and Burnham regimes. Pick a year. There are more state-funded literary books, either directly or indirectly, published under Height and Burnham in any comparative period than under the people.